Hey, everybody. Welcome to another Facebook Live. Today, we're talking about a topic we haven't talked about yet. I haven't even seen much out in the press or in anyone else talking about this either, but we've gotten some questions about it. How do I manage my boss? How do I influence my boss? How do I manage up when I'm working remotely? And a lot of you are doing that. And so we're going to get started. We're going to dive right into all that in a second or two. Here's the thing, though. If you have questions for me, they don't have to be about that. If you've got questions for me about anything related to remote leadership or remote work, if you will share them on the platform that you're in, I will see them if you're on YouTube or Facebook. But if you're on LinkedIn, I need the help of my able assistant, Marlene. Marlene, say hello.
Hello. How's everybody out there? We're doing good here.
All right. Well, they can't actually respond to you except in a comment, Marlene. But anyway, so Marlene is here as my eyes and ears on the LinkedIn side. So if you have a question about anything about remote leadership, remote work, or dealing with the stuff we're dealing with during this pandemic, please just type it in. Let us know. And if you want to let us know where you're from or where you're coming in from, we would love to know that too. Now, you see this little ticker going across the bottom. I'm going to tell you about that. Then I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to dive into my first question. Okay. So tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern time, you can go to, as you can see there, kevinikenberry.com/live, and you can join us, or you can actually watch from whatever channel that you are watching me from right now as well, because we're going to go live and we're going to help. I'm going to have some guests, and we're going to talk about the challenge that people are facing right now, trying to be a productive worker, trying to be an effective parent, trying to teach their kids and take care of themselves all at the same time. We're going to do that tomorrow starting at 7 o'clock. I've got a couple of great guests. Wherever it is that you're joining me, you can join us then. And please tell others that you think could find this useful. And if that's not you, but you work with people who are dealing with that, let them know, but also join us as well, because you'll get a better sense of the challenges and struggles that they're facing as well. Let me turn that off and turn on our first question. I'll see if I can read it without my glasses. So the first question is, how can I have a voice to management during a crisis? So when I think about this question, it takes me a couple of different directions. First of all, if you are already a leader, you could have this question, right? Because you need to have a voice up. You could be an individual contributor, and you could have this question as well. So the answer is largely the same, or my thoughts about this are largely the same. And here's where I'll start. If you didn't really have a voice, if you really didn't have a lot of influence before, it's going to be harder to have it now, but not impossible. Regardless of what your relationships or trust level or access to the leaders or the management levels that you would want to have a conversation with here now are, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. Because this is framed as during a crisis, your leaders and your management team are probably more scattered, with more things going on than ever. Maybe not more scattered, they may actually be more focused, but they've got a lot of things going on. And so if you want to have a voice, if you want to have influence, you've got to know where they're at. So the more that you can speak to their challenges, the more that you can speak to their worries, or the more that you can connect the point that you want to make to their worries, concerns, and issues, the better chance you've got. I mean, just think about that. If you're a parent, your kids, when they come to you with something and they frame it in your perspective, not in theirs, it's more likely that you will listen. Same thing with your spouse or anyone else. So really what I'm saying here is understand where your management folks are, where your leadership team is, where your leader is, and try to frame your voice, try to frame your feedback, try to frame what the message you wanted to deliver, and connect it to what their goals or their challenges are at this moment. And so for example, if the thing that you want to talk about isn't really related to the crisis, then hold on. Don't try to bring it up now. You're just going to be noise. Even if your point is a good one, it's not going to be the right time. Okay? So that's that. And I can see we've got some folks joining us on LinkedIn. Thank you for those joining us there. We appreciate it. And for all of you joining us everywhere else, thank you as well. Let me put up the second question, which I've heard from a couple of people in just the last few days. And in fact, Charlie and Susan both asked basically the same question. This was on a webinar that I led the other day, and the question was, what if my boss, what if my leader, what if my supervisor has a negative attitude? What do I do? Well, I've said this many times, including on one of these recent Q&As, that we really can't coach attitude. We can coach behavior. And you're saying, but wait a minute, Kevin, I'm not coaching my boss anyway. Well, maybe you could. But let's just think about this for a second. Okay. I'm sorry, I was distracted. Marlene will appreciate this. I'm looking out the window in my office and I see snow falling on the 15th of April. Just saying. So, you can put in the comments if you like snow or not. And maybe you don't like it in April. I'm not sure I like it in April, although I love it most of the time. So if your boss has a negative attitude, the first question I would have is, how is that impacting you? How are their behaviors impacting you and your colleagues? And that's where I would start. Don't say, hey, boss, you got a negative attitude. That's not going to work very well anyway. Rather, focus on the behaviors and how is it impacting you? And then, if you can, share with them how it's impacting you. Because sometimes people aren't aware of how their attitude or their behaviors, in this case, are really impacting others. And as leaders, we could say, well, they should know, maybe. But the reality is that they may not know, or they may not think it's showing through. And so we want to make sure, number one, that we can describe to them what the impact is in a non-judgmental way. And so then you have a better frame of reference to have a conversation. So let's say that Marlene is my boss. And I could say, so Marlene, I've noticed in meetings that you've done this, this, and this, and here's how it's impacting me and others. And I didn't know if you knew that, but man, it would be really helpful if you did these things instead. Now, you may not have a relationship with your boss that makes that easy to have, but I will tell you that being specific about the behavior and the impact on it is a much easier conversation. Coming at it from the place of, I figure you want to know, is a far better way to come at it. So I'd encourage you to consider that. Secondly, notice where I started. What's their behavior and how's it impacting you? Well, if you just don't like it, if you just don't agree with it, but it's not really impacting your work or productivity, maybe you need to let it go. And thirdly, if it's impacting you negatively and you either aren't willing to do the kinds of things I just described, or you've done them and didn't have much success, then I would say to you, do what you can to shield yourself as much as you can. I'm not saying to ignore your boss. As a person who is a leader, I don't really want my team to ignore me. But if it's negatively impacting you, you want to do whatever you can to keep your own attitude where you want it to be. And so don't ignore your boss in this case. But if certain behaviors or certain situations are bothering you, just try to let them slide off a little bit more. Try not to take them personally and try to say, hey, everybody right now is dealing with all of this crisis stuff in their own ways. And so try not to personalize it too much. And that may help a little bit as well. I see that I have a note coming in, and let's see. I have to have glasses. Marlene says that Kathleen says hi and that she likes snow. Well, Kathleen, I'm with you. I'm not sure I'm with you on the 15th of April when I have spring flowers, but as a general rule, I'm a huge fan of snow. Let me go back to our third question. I could probably spend a whole hour on this topic of, dealing with your boss, managing up. And I'm just going to answer these questions that I've gotten and anything else that you guys share as specifically in the context of doing this remotely, because it is harder, right? Because you're not able to have that face-to-face conversation by all means. If you're trying to influence someone else in any significant way, turning on these webcams be very helpful to you. I'm quite sure. Henry asked a couple of questions of us recently. And one of the things that Henry asked was this: what if my boss keeps calling outside of normal working hours, like during dinner? Henry actually asked that about more than just the boss, but that's certainly part of it. So we've got to make sure, first of all, if you're a leader, Remember, your people may be on different time zones. Remember, they may eat dinner at different times than you do, and be really clear about this for yourself. Do everything you can to make sure you're not doing this to Henry and Henrietta and everybody else. That's the first thing. But if this is happening to you, whether it's from your boss, a supervisor, someone else on a project team, or someone else on the team, this is screaming for the fact that we need to have conversation about expectations. It's just screaming that, right? So my suggestion would be is if it literally is your supervisor, the next chance you get, not when they called you at dinner, but the next chance you get after that, to say, hey, Marlene, would it be possible for us to set some boundaries or times then when I'm not available to take calls, because I'm trying to balance my work life as well as my family life or my personal life? Can we figure out a way to do that? And I'm going to hope that most leaders are going to say, yeah, we can figure that out. And so I think you just want to naturally open up that line of communication for that conversation. Let me tell you this, whether it's the boss or somebody else, if you don't bring it up and it happens again, and then it happens a third time, they're going to assume it's okay. And so unless they suddenly get the blinding aha moment, if they don't know, they're going to keep calling then. They're going to keep asking to have a meeting then. They're going to want you to fire up your webcam then, whatever it is. So I think that it's our responsibility to say, hey, here's how this is impacting me. Or can we figure out a time? Can we figure out a way? Right? It's just screaming that we need to have clearer expectations. And the thing is, that person wasn't calling you during dinner probably before you all worked at home. And so why can't we set some boundaries? Now, those boundaries and those times might be different now, and that's okay. And you might even agree that they might need to be different now. I have had more meetings with some of my team members in the evening in the last month than I can remember having before. I hope that in every case, there's been conversations up front where that's an option, but not the only time. Here's what you know. What you know is that everyone's dealing with something different at home. And some of them are saying, man, it'd be way better for me to have this conversation at 7:30 than it would to be at 5 o'clock when I'm trying to help my kids finish their schoolwork or whatever. So the most important thing is to open the line of communication and have a clearer conversation about this. Get some clear agreements, some clear boundaries, some clear times, and recognize that you might decide as a group or individually that you're going to be more flexible about those times than you were before. That's okay. I'm not saying there's a right answer here. I'm saying that the group ought to decide together and try to come to something that works for everybody. Okay. So I have one more question that came in for me. So if you're watching, if you're listening and you've got a question or a comment, please share it. I can see them unless you're on LinkedIn, and there Marlene is my eyes and ears and can tell me if it's coming in from there. So I've really talked about 3 questions that talk about influencing up or influencing outside of ourselves. We have to recognize that in all of these cases, we can't make the boss be positive. We can't make the boss quit calling us. We can't do any of those things. But the reality is that we can have influence. And just because someone is above us hierarchically doesn't necessarily mean that we can't have influence and we can't ask a question and we can't do something that will help all of us be more successful. So I strongly encourage you to do that, to exercise your own ability to influence and exercise your own ability to know that you are not powerless. And that if you don't bring it up, they might not even know. I'd strongly encourage you to keep a positive intent in terms of your assumptions. Assume that others have positive intent and maybe just aren't aware, were unaware, just had a blind spot. So I'd encourage that as well. I do have one more question, but it looks like maybe I have something from LinkedIn. No questions or comments from LinkedIn. So I have one more question, and this isn't necessarily only about up, but it kind of related, and so I thought I'd share it now. Tanya asked me this question. She goes, I think my rosy and positive attitude rubs people the wrong way. What should I do? Well, that's probably happened to me. I've probably done that. Marlene could probably tell you better than I, as a member of my team. But let me make a couple of comments. There was a character in some books that I think came out in the 19-teens originally, and they were about this young girl named Pollyanna, for whom everything was rosy, for whom everything was amazing, and there were no problems, and there were no dark clouds or anything else like that. And so I often think of Pollyanna as what I don't want to be. Do I want to be positive? Yes. Do I want to be proactive? Yes. Do I want to rub people the wrong way? No. And so what's the difference? The difference here is that we can acknowledge that not everybody's where we are. That we need to make sure that we have a understanding that some people may be experiencing something different than us. Does it help us to provide a rosy and positive outlook? I think it definitely helps us, and it can definitely help others. But to an extreme, as Tanya asks, it can get in the way. You don't want people thinking, well, there's Kevin ignoring the reality and just being all positive all the time. We can be aware of and acknowledge the challenges. Like right now, are there challenges that people are facing? Absolutely, 100%. Am I aware of that? Yes. Should all of us be aware of that? Yes. Does that necessarily mean that we're feeling it like others are? Not necessarily. Can our positive attitude help them? Perhaps. What we've got to make sure we don't do is that we just sort of gloss over, ignore, don't acknowledge how other people are feeling. I talked in a webinar last week about this, and I talked about the idea of acknowledge and then move forward. Acknowledge and then move. And I use the phrase yes and. So yes, I understand that this is hard. And yes, I understand that it's not as easy as we'd like it to be. And given that, what are we going to do? And given that, what if we thought about it this way? And given the challenges, what are the opportunities that are in front of us? That's the way I would encourage you to think about it. So if you have that rosy, positive attitude like Tanya, what I'm going to encourage you to do is to make sure that you're not rubbing people the wrong way by acknowledging other feelings, acknowledging that other people may be seeing something different than you, and that's okay, and still be that person that's trying to be a voice, that yes and voice, if you will. And in many ways, that's what we're trying to do with this event that we're doing tomorrow night. I opened this Q&A with this, and I'll close with it as well. If you didn't hear it then, wherever you're watching me from now, whether you're watching us live or you're watching us later, you can come back to this same location tomorrow night, Thursday, at 7 p.m. And we're going to be talking about the challenges that folks who are trying to work from home, parent all day, teach school, be a spouse, and take care of themselves all at once. And we're calling it juggling the balls that you can't afford to drop. We're doing it live. I'm going to have some guests. I'm going to be in this very location. We've got some great things planned. We're going to acknowledge the challenges, and we're going to try to help you think about some ways to deal with all of these juggling balls, all these hats that you need to wear. We're going to try and help you do that. So if that's you, man, I hope you'll come back and join us. You can join us wherever you're watching us now, or go to kevinikenberry.com/live and watch us. You can comment then. We're going to want you to be involved in it. It's not going to be it's not a webinar. It's going to be a conversation that we hope that you'll join us in. So I hope that you'll join us there, and I hope that you'll be back here again tomorrow. Yep, Thursday. We'll be right back here at noon doing some Q&A. So if you've got a question and you are watching me later and not live right now, put your question in the comments. We'll get that and we'll answer it tomorrow. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope it doesn't snow here too much. And I'll close the way my colleague and sidekick, Marlene, taught me to be sharing this over the last month or so. And that is this: be well, be safe, be remarkable. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.